Don't touch that dial, because tonight we're going to talk about the golden age of radio.
The Dave Baum Show. Tonight, Dave's guests are old-time radio expert Chuck Schaden, two members of Carl McIntyre's Save America Crusade, and the Simone Chimpanzees. And now, here's Dave Baum.
Good evening, everybody. You remember the days when radios like this one were the center of attention in everyone's living room? Well, tonight we'll relive those golden days of radio with old-time radio expert Chuck Schaden. Later, we're going to talk with two members of Dr. Carl McIntyre's Save America Crusade and find out why they're so worried about communism in the U.S. Finally, we'll close the show with some guests from the circus, the Simone Chimps. But first, let's meet Chuck Schaden. Chuck, this is a fabulous old-time radio, and you're probably the only man that I know of who has spent so many years working not only with the radio shows in the past, but giving people a chance to listen to them and enjoy them, and also have them in their own possessions. We've done radio shows in the past, but I guess, you know, we start out with, you know, how did you get into this bag? Just because you were a kid and you happen to like radio?
Oh, sure. I grew up with radio, and I enjoyed it, Dave, and the best part of it was that, you know, it was a part of me, and I participated in radio. I used my imagination. They didn't have a show on that I didn't listen to that I wasn't a part of. Then television came along, and radio went. And we didn't have it anymore. So I didn't miss it. I was watching Uncle Milty on Tuesday and Arthur Godfrey on Wednesday and all the rest of them. But then one day I decided I want Mr. District Attorney again. And so I went back to my radio. It was a little more modern than this one. It was a plastic one, you know, by this time. It was plastic. And Mr. District Attorney wasn't there anymore. And Fibber McGee was gone, and all of the favorites were missing, and I think I let them down, and so I didn't know what to do.
Well, you had nothing. You hadn't taped any of the shows.
Oh, no.
I
didn't even have a tape recorder.
Okay, so you really had nothing going for you. Well, where did you begin to catalog all these shows?
Well, I found a friend who was in the service over in Korea about 1957 or 58.
Mm-hmm.
And he was working for Armed Forces Radio. And one night, he was on duty all by himself, and he had a long record going, and he didn't know what to do. He was just trying to kill time. And he went into a room marked no admittance, you know. And so he opened the door, obviously, no admittance, says, come right in, right. And along the wall was a giant stack of large 16-inch transcription discs. And he didn't know what, he thought just music or something. He pulled one of the discs out of its slot, and it said Grand Central Station on it. And I mean, he was my age. He grew up with this stuff. He went to another disc, and there it said, you know, My Friend Irma. And another one, you know, Let's Pretend. And one show after another. You see, they had recorded all of these programs during the war, and then they sent them to all the Armed Forces radio stations throughout the country. And they played them for the guys in the service.
Put them aside.
And then they put them in the side. Have you ever heard of the government throwing away anything? You know, they don't. So he, you know, as a lark, he taped a few of the shows. By this time, tape recordings were in effect. And he taped a few of the shows. No, he knew of my interest. He sent them back to me. And when I got a hold of the tape, I almost passed out because I was listening to Blondie again, you know. And so I said, don't touch that dial. And he started recording a few of the shows. And this was a spontaneous thing that happened concurrently with other people in other parts of the country and parts of the world. They came across some of these things. And, you know, as you find someone who's interested in whatever hobby you have or whatever special interest you have, you kind of get together somehow. And I found a guy over here who was interested in it, and he had another source for these things, and another guy over there. And so we started trading. Well, with the radio programs on tape, you can just you know, I can trade you a Lone Ranger program for a Gene Autry Melody Ranch without even giving up my Lone Ranger
Well, how
show.
extensive is your library now after all of these years of cultivating these kinds of shows? How many?
I have 22,000 old-time radio shows in my collection.
Do you cover the gamut from A to Z, or is there maybe one or two that you could never get a hold of?
Oh, there are many shows that I don't have, but I don't say they're lost.
Do you have every show that was on the programming log for radio?
No.
You don't? Like one copy of at least every show?
No, I have 10 years worth of Fibber, McGee, and Molly.
Okay.
Almost consecutive shows.
How about Roberta Quinlan?
Roberta, that was mostly on television.
Did she have a 15-minute radio show at the very, very end?
Well, she may have been doing it along with...
But she wasn't doing a program, a serialized program.
No.
How would you compare the old days of radio at the height, maybe the mid-late 30s and 40s, to primetime television today? A lot of people complain about primetime television, and I would wonder if in your research you found people complaining about what was then total time primetime radio.
Most people don't complain about the radio days. And of course, I'm working in an area with people who really love those sounds, and they have nothing to complain about. If you don't like it, then you don't listen to the things that I'm doing. But you see, in radio, the program didn't live or die in 3 weeks, as it does on television today.
Right.
Programs were on the air for 10 years and 12 years. They didn't have the budget problems as they have today. I mean, you have the actors, you have the writers, you have the microphones, you have the scripts, and the sound effects man, and a little music, and that's it. You don't have to build sets. The audience builds a set.
Right.
The imagination.
What kind of people are turning on to this? Now, you've been in Chicago radio for some years, and you now, because of your own enterprise, you kind of have a network, a nostalgia network, where you can catch your programs on a number of different stations. But what kind of people tune in? I would guess that you either get the very, very young who are the curious, or the very, very old who say, oh, I remember when it was so much better back in those days of radio.
When I started 5 years ago, I thought that the only people who would be interested in this would be the people like myself who remembered it. And but the most amazing thing of all is the fact that there's a whole new generation of people who are listening and enjoying. They come across it. They find, because someone older in their living room is listening to it, they stop and they listen and they really turn on to it. They don't like everything. I don't think anybody should like everything.
What do they tell you that they like about these shows?
Their imagination can be used. It's creative. It's a new, to many people, art form that has absolutely died. I mean, there is no reason why we can't have creative radio like this today. The networks themselves sold out the television. I'm saying it's bad, but they gave up radio. They should have. If someone told me once, a writer for radio, said that if somebody other than NBC and CBS and ABC and Mutual had taken over television and left those networks to continue with radio, radio would be in a much stronger position creatively today, and television would be open. They would be competing with one another.
Yet I get a sense that there's a turn inward, maybe in a small way. Now, you do what you do. The network, one of the networks, CBS, also has a mystery theater. You know, I'm not very happy about that because it runs at the same time that Contact runs, and I know that there are a lot of people who tune into that. But do you think that that is a step back, or just CBS taking advantage of nostalgia and a gimmick?
No, I don't. I think it's a step forward for radio today. You step back, and I'm taking a step back by reviving the old shows. CBS is taking a step forward by creating some new shows and putting it on today. I believe that they tried to get into this because of the nostalgia craze and the interest in the old shows. And they said, well, let's see if we can do something with it. And I give them a lot of credit because they took a chance on doing it. But they were sponsor-wise sold out within the first 3 months of the series. Listenership increased in every town where the station carried them. They renewed them for a second year, and they're going gangbusters. They're planning on coming up with another thing to complement that, maybe a midday hour with 3 or 4 soap opera kinds of things. In the middle of the day. It's not a bad...
Got enough of that on television. They're going to add soap operas to the radio again.
Television soap operas are radio soap operas. You take a look at a TV soap opera and see how much action there is. There's no action on it because the women who are watching a soap opera on television are out of the room, they're moving around, they're all over, they're listening.
That's a good point. How many people here are into old-time radio? Let me see a show of hands. Everybody into old... could you swing the boom mic around to get this gentleman on the end here? Would you stand up, sir? What's your favorite old-time radio show?
Oh, I think I enjoy Fred Allen.
Fred Allen?
Yeah, he's always kind of an interesting commentary on the current events. He had a lot of fun with them, and I enjoy that kind of...
What can you tell us about Fred Allen?
Well, Fred Allen was the most literate of the radio comedians. He wrote 99% of his own material. He wrote for every guest that he had. He dealt with topical things, and his stuff, even though it was topical in the 40s and the 30s, it's still very funny today because it had the combination of topicality, if that's such a word, and humor. And they played together, and they worked very well. He'd take that weekly stroll down Allen's Alley, and he'd meet Mrs. Nussbaum and Senator Claghorn and Titus Moody, and it was just great. You waited for that each week for him to do that.
I want to see if we can't get Fred Allen. Let's see what
Gosh, Portland, it's good to be back in Allen's Alley. Well, let's see what Titus Moody is up to tonight.
Howdy, Bob.
Say, Mr. Moody, you look shorter tonight.
First time I ever wore a union suit and stockings.
Well, what makes you look shorter?
It's trying to keep up my stockings.
Your stockings?
Yeah. There's a little door hangs down on the back of the union suit.
Well, I know.
And when I button that door onto my stockings,
Yes?
it pulls me down 6 inches.
It'll do it every time. Well, Mr. Moody, what do you think about Mayor LaGuardia leaving office?
Why, he's been a good mayor, what there is of him.
Well, what kind of work do you think he should go in for?
He'd be a good man on a farm, Bub.
Well, how do you mean?
He's the only man I know that can milk a cow standing up.
Tell me, Mr. Moody, do you think the mayor is sorry to go?
Oh, I know just how he feels, Bub.
You do, huh?
Yeah, I used to be mayor in my town.
You were the mayor?
Yeah, but I wasn't no LaGuardia.
You mean,
After working around the farm for 30 years,
yes?
I didn't smell like no little flower. So
Oh, that was... The thing that comes to my mind is Titus Moody sounds exactly like a guy now who cuts commercials for a bread.
That's the same fellow.
Pepperidge Farm. Pepperidge Farm bread. Is that the same guy?
That's Parker Fenley, right. Parker Fenley is the same guy. You see him in the TV commercials, and he's riding the old wagon or something like that.
Because I can't recall any other voice like his.
Yeah.
You hear the voice, but you really don't know what the guy's name is.
See, that was 30 years old, Dave, and that's just as entertaining today as it ever was.
Those
Now,
lines stand
yeah.
up.
Now, you have to know that Fiorello LaGuardia was a little guy. He was the mayor of New York, and that they called him, because of his name, Fiorello, the Little Flower.
Mm-hmm.
And those things were important to this. But the delivery and that business about the long underwear or tying it to the socks and all, it's just great. You know, I was saying before, I started with this 5 years ago with 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon, and starting tomorrow, Sunday, we kick off a nostalgia network in the metropolitan Chicago area.
How many stations are you going to
We
have?
have 6 stations. We're on 37 hours a week with the old-time radio shows, and 7 days a week.
Let's kick into some of that nostalgia with Chuck Schaden.
Jack Armstrong! Jack Armstrong! Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy! Wave the flag for Hudson High, boys. Show them how we stand. Ever shall our team be champions, known throughout the land.
Wheaties, Breakfast of Champions, bring you the thrilling transcribed adventures of Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. Now, today I have 2 kinds of important news for you. The first is bad. The second part is good, so listen carefully. Today will be the last broadcast of our adventures of Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. Yes, Jack and his friends
have been having some mighty exciting times all season, so they're going to take a vacation just like everybody else. That's the bad news. And now for the good. Next season, just about the 1st of October, Jack Armstrong and his friends will all be back on the air again with a brand new series of adventures that will take you halfway around the world with fun and excitement.
If you're like me, you need to know a lot. I want to know what's happening in Chicago and the world. How the traffic's moving. Who's leading in World Cup tennis? I want to know about the best plays, movies, and restaurants. And I don't have to wait to know it all when I listen to WBBM News Radio 78. I hear it as it happens. News, weather, traffic, entertainment reviews 24 hours a day. When you listen to WBBM News Radio 78, you know it all. Know it all with those news people.
Nelson loves me, Nelson loves me, Nelson Brothers loves me. Nelson Brothers loves me, and they love you too.
Nelson Brothers Furniture and Appliance Showrooms, where your credit power can give you buying power for the good life. A world of rooms from $288 to $1,288. Choose the living room full of furniture you've always wanted. Nelson Brothers delivers a living room full of furniture. Everything from rugs on the floor to pictures on the wall. Priced the Nelson Brothers way from $288.
Nelson Brothers wouldn't think of charging you for delivery.
Nelson Brothers open Monday and Thursday until 9, Sunday 10 to 5. South in Woodlawn Gardens, Cottage Grove at 63rd, Halstead at 65th, 9605 South Cicero Avenue, Nelson Brothers North, Broadway near Lawrence, Lincoln Avenue near Belmont, 1751 North Harlem Avenue, Nelson's Warehouse Showrooms, 2750 West Grand Avenue.
Nelson Brothers love me, and they love you too.
Shadow, no.
Chuck, every time I hear that sinister laugh of the Shadow, I have the feeling he was some kind of a molester. In the you know.
See, that's how times change.
yeah. In those days, he was a champion of justice. You could never see him. All you'd say is, "Oops, excuse me, Shadow." But
no,
today,
you never saw the Shadow. He, in the Orient, learned the secret to cloud men's minds so that no one would know to whom the voice of the invisible Shadow belonged, except his constant friend and companion, the lovely Margot Lane.
How did she know? Well, he didn't cloud her mind then,
oh,
right?
No. Not on the show, he didn't, you know.
Okay.
You know that Orson Welles was the first actor to play the Shadow, and Agnes Moorehead was opposite him as Margot Lane.
Agnes Moorehead played Margot Lane?
Yeah. And Orson Welles. Even while Welles was scaring the daylights out of half the country with his War of the Worlds.
I want to talk to you about that, but I want to get the audience's reaction. I want to know what your favorite old-time radio show was. And for some of you in the audience, you probably don't have any favorite old-time radio shows because you weren't around. Let's start with the gentleman in the back row. Yes, sir. What was your favorite old-time radio show?
Duffy's Tavern.
Duffy's Tavern. Let me see. Duffy's Tavern, Duffy and his sidekick. May he have a sidekick?
Well, he had Finnegan.
All right, Finnegan. That's the guy.
Hello, Arch.
All right.
Duffy was the proprietor. Archie. Duffy was never on the show. His manager was Ed Gardner. Archie, the manager. And the show would open with a telephone ring, and Archie would pick up the phone. He'd say, "Hello, Duffy's Tavern, where the elite meet to eat. Archie, the manager, speaking. Duffy ain't here."
Right.
"Hello, Duffy," he'd say. And then he would tell who the guest is for the evening, and on it would go.
It was a half-an-hour show?
Half-hour show, one of the best written shows on radio, because Archie always used the wrong words to describe things. It was
which made him a very real guy. To
oh yeah, it was fantastically written. Yeah,
all right, Duffy's Tavern. How about you, Am?
Fibber, McGee, and Molly.
Fibber, McGee, and Molly. I would think everybody likes Fibber, McGee, and Molly, right?
Yeah, they started right in Chicago. They started in Chicago on WENR, Jim and Marion Jordan. That was an old station that was owned originally by the E.N. Rawlin tube manufacturing company for Zenith radios, ENR. So you took the call letters from the different stations, and I mean from their ownership. Then they were on the Smith family on that show. Then they went to WMAQ, and they played in a program that was written by Don Quinn and Jim Jordan called the Smack Out. And then in 1935, the Johnson's Wax Company of Racine, Wisconsin wanted somebody to sell their wax for their cars and for the kitchen floors, and they got Jim and Marion Jordan and Don Quinn, and they created Fibber, McGee, and Molly. And from 1935 to almost 1960, they were regulars
almost 25, quarter of a century.
Yeah, yeah.
Fibber, McGee, and Molly. You like them very much?
Very much.
Lady next to you, what was your favorite show, ma'am? Would you stand up, please?
I think it was The Shadow.
The Shadow. Why did you like The Shadow?
I liked any kind of mysteries, and it was fun.
Did you like a show called Inner Sanctum?
I was a little young, and I was a little scared.
I remember Inner Sanctum. Inner Sanctum was in Cincinnati around 8 o'clock at night, I think. Somewhere between 7:30 and 8. I think it was 8 o'clock. And I used to go to bed at that time because my mother never let me stay up late. I used to go to bed late, and I always had to go to bed to Inner Sanctum. I always knew I was going to get scared, but I would just kindly, blithely move over to the radio and flick on Inner Sanctum.
Good evening, friends. This is your host to welcome you through the creaking door into the inner sanctum. Come in, come in. I've been reading my fan mail. Huh? Oh, sure, I get lots of it. Delivered in a hearse every morning. One lonely heart writes, despite your sinister voice, you strike me as a fine gentleman and a homebody. I am companionable, good-natured, unmarried, and I've been hardly dead a year. Won't you please exchange photographs, signed, Lonesome. Did somebody say the lady spook out of turn?
Would that make it today?
Hey,
the lady spook out of turn?
Oh, sure. You know, Dave, the Inner Sanctum program was produced by a fellow by the name of Hyman Brown, and he is the executive producer of the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. And if you listen to that show, you hear E.G. Marshall at the beginning open a creaking door.
How would you compare who was this fellow?
This was Raymond Edward Johnson.
Raymond
he was
Edward
known
Johnson.
as Raymond, your host.
All right.
And he played it. Well, as you heard it here. E.G. Marshall is a little straighter with it, and the humor is gone. They don't use the kind of a black humor, if you will, on the Mystery Theater as this is.
All right, let's keep going down the line. Sir, what was your favorite show on the radio?
National Barn Dance. And on Saturday night, I'd listen to the whole 4 hours of it every week.
The National Barn Dance? Right. Who did a National Barn Dance?
Oh, WLS in Chicago. This was way before the WLS you know today. This was when it was owned by the Prairie Farmer newspaper, and they had a National Barn Dance. WLS Barn Dance came from the 8th Street Theater in Chicago, the old hayloft. And you used to listen to Lulabelle and Scotty, and Bob Atcher was on that. Georgie Goebel, a little boy soprano, was on that show, and they broadcast something like from 8 to midnight every Saturday night.
7:30 midnight every Saturday night.
Give that man $5 silver.
What was the best part of that show as far as you're concerned?
Well, either the Maple City Four and Jimmy James, the banjo player.
Jimmy James?
He's still around, too.
They had people that lived, just for that show. You know, that was a Clear Channel station. It was heard all over the Midwest. And farmers would come in on Saturday night, after working in the fields all day, just to see this show. Baby Genevieve and Grace Moore, and it really was a wonderful family show. And
never having lived in Chicago at that time, I can't remember the barn dance. That's what they called it, huh? All right, this gentleman over here in the first row. Yes, sir. What was your favorite show?
My favorite show was Jack Benny. And I like Gunsmoke and Have Gun Will Travel.
All right, Jack Benny, Gunsmoke, and Have Gun Will Travel. Was Have Gun Will Travel on radio?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, next Friday morning on WLTD, we're going to have Gun Will Travel from radio.
Well, who played Paladin?
John Daner, that's right.
John Daner?
John Dehner.
The actor with the mustache, the tall fellow with the... I think I'm thinking of the same John Dehner.
Yeah, that's the one.
All
Well,
right.
do you know who played Matt Dillon on radio?
Well, Matt Dillon was, the heavy-set...
William Conrad.
William Conrad, okay.
See, on radio, your appearance didn't matter. Your voice was everything. And you would use your voice, and you could set the scene. You know, you could be, on radio, you could be in a towering inferno on radio, simply by having someone crinkle some cellophane in front of the microphone. And by God, we'd be at home listening, and that place would be ablaze.
Well, that's really what the magic was of Fibber, McGee, and Molly, wasn't it? When they'd open the, they'd open that closet door,
yeah, right.
the sound effects and all that. You know, it'd almost be like you tune it in now. You pick up Fibber, McGee, and Molly opening up.
The Johnson Wax program with Fibber, McGee, and Molly. The makers of Johnson's Wax and Johnson's Self-Polishing Glow Coat present Fibber, McGee, and Molly, written by Don Quinn, with music by the King's Men and Billy Mills Orchestra. What is so rare as a day in spring in Wistful Vista, with Mrs. McGee sitting reading on the porch, her husband picking weeds out of the lawn, and his on and off pal Gildersleeve fixing window screens next door. We can't think of anything. But that's how it is today with Fibber, McGee, and Molly.
Hey, Molly, I got a notion to go fishing. I just found a worm.
Well, keep scratching around, dearie. Maybe you'll find a horseshoe and we can go horseback riding.
When you listen to some of these shows in retrospect, I could never remember Gildersleeve living on the same block or being neighbors of Fibber, McGee, and Molly.
Oh, yeah. He was always the next-door neighbor, and they were friendly rivals constantly. Gildersleeve is Hal Perry. He's still alive, going strong out in California. Jim Jordan, who was Fibber, is alive and well. And I just want to plug one thing into this. Next Wednesday afternoon on my new show on WXFM, I'll have an interview with Jim Jordan, who was Fibber, Hal Perry, who was Gildy, Gail Gordon, who was Mayor Latrivia.
Gail Gordon, he was with, Brooks?
Well, he was
he's
Mr.
a lot of
Conklin
things,
on
yeah,
Our Miss
okay.
Brooks, and he's been with Lucy on television for years and years and years. And we're all going to talk about the Fibber McGee show, and we'll have a complete Fibber McGee show Wednesday afternoon.
What is your personal favorite? What do you think was the greatest radio show of all time?
Well, I really love the Fibber McGee stuff. I think I listen to it every week, and when if I ever find myself with a free half hour with nothing really to do, I just love to sit and listen to Fibber McGee and Molly. Jack Benny is a very close second. You see, that comedy
With their
is
lines,
timeless.
the important thing is, I've heard some shows like The Lone Ranger, for example, because of changing attitudes over the years between the good guy, bad guy, Indian, cowboy, then and today, a lot of the Lone Ranger's lines wouldn't stand up today. They'd sound terribly campy and quite childish.
You know, it's all in your point of view, Dave. When I play an old radio show on the air, I always, wherever possible, I always say, this is from January 15th of 1943, or whatever the date is. And when you watch a movie on television, an old movie, you look in the TV book and it says 1941, right? Now, if you approach that movie or the radio show or an old television show from that point of view, say, hey, this is 1943 or 51 or whatever it is, then you can appreciate it from that position. But if you're going to laugh at the long dresses the women are wearing in a 1939 movie, or you're going to say some of the silly lines that they're saying on a radio show, then if you're going to approach it from with a little campiness, well, then you're going to get a different brand of humor out of it. I don't believe that all of the old radio shows were perfect or great. You know, some of them were downright bad, and we play some of those too. But all of them were interesting, and even some of the shows that are from a 25-year later point of view, really corny. They're funny.
Aside from what you do and what a few other people and a network does, do you really see a tremendous resurgence of this? Because of radio today is music, all news, talk and news. This is a specialty. Do you really see a day coming? Now, to be perfectly pragmatic about it, do you see a day coming when perhaps big city radio stations like WIND or GN or any of the others will actually swing back into this kind of program, or do you think it's going to be on a selective basis like you do it?
Oh, I don't think we'll ever see it. on a full scale again. I think it will be on a select basis. I think the inroads that the CBS is making with this kind of thing, they're not giving over their whole broadcast day to it.
Mm-hmm.
But, for example, in Chicago, with their 23 hours of news, they find the space for it. They weren't happy with it in the beginning. I don't know if they're still happy with it, but they've got it. And they've got more listeners at 10:30 at night than almost anybody except Dave Baum on WIND.
And I wish they changed their time slot, frankly. It bugs me.
Well, but you see, I think that the listening audience deserves to find some place in some town where they can find either the old shows or the new shows. There's a group on WNIB called the Theater of Finance, PHYNANCE, and once a month they write and produce and create original radio drama. I mean, that's only an hour a month, but at least somebody's doing it. There is a place for it, and while we probably don't have, we got 200 million people in the United States, you know, networks would say, well, there's only 30 million people or 80 million people who want to hear this. You know. Only 80 million people. They deserve to get it.
I'd like to have 80 million people as my
That's
audience.
right.
Chuck,
That's
I want to thank you for joining us tonight with a little nostalgia. Not a little anymore. It's an awful lot as far as you're concerned. The Nostalgia Network of Chuck Schaden's on Chicago radio. And I remember when you were struggling to get any exposure at all, and now you're going great guns, and probably 2 or 3 years from now when we have you on again, at that time, we'll probably have you on before then, but I would figure in another 2 or 3 years, you'll probably be owning a couple of stations, playing 24 hours of nostalgia radio. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Chuck Schaden has been my guest. This is National Radio Month, by the way. Even though we're right on the borderline with June, we still consider it National Radio Month every month. Stick around for our weekly Lantern Award. That's a doozy this week. And then we'll have a conversation with a couple of members of the Cloth who are part of an organization to save America. Stick around for that after this.
Kellogg's Pep, the super delicious cereal, presents the adventures of Superman. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman.
Say, gang, you've probably all read plenty of stories about mine-laying planes. But have you any idea what one looks like? Well, right now is your chance to find out, because one of the prize model planes in the Kellogg's Pet packages these days is a mine layer, a British Handley Page Hamden. And right on the back of this nifty model are printed lots of valuable pointers about it, as well as a list of the other planes you can get in that particular series.